Black Ops 3 is a lot of things to a lot of different people. It's possibly the greatest Call of Duty ever created to some, or it could just be another cog in the never-ending yearly cycle of bland first-person shooters. Or just maybe, it could be a game that had a lot of potential, but spoiled by a few mechanics that have left a scar across the face of a once beloved franchise. This is the third entry in my video essay series covering the main Call of Duty games, where I cover all aspects of them from the gameplay to community reactions. If you do enjoy, then please subscribe and like the video. Black Ops 4 will be the next one covered on the channel if this video reaches 3,000 likes. There are timestamps and chapters to this video if you want to find a specific section and skip around a little bit. With that said, let's begin. Early April of 2015, a series of Snapchat codes began appearing in Black Ops 2 multiplayer maps, and when scanned it would add Call of Duty as a friend on Snapchat. This was the beginning of what would be Black Ops 3's viral marketing campaign, which featured a few small videos to hype up the reveal trailer on April 23rd. And on that day, we got a 3-minute trailer that was a bit cryptic, followed by a real reveal trailer only a few days later on the 26th. In this final trailer, we finally got our first glimpse of the game's 3 main modes of campaign, multiplayer, and zombies. Whether or not you even like Black Ops 3, you have to admit that Fade to Black was an incredible song choice for the trailer and really set the tone for the game ahead with its crazy fast-paced style that almost felt a little bit too far from traditional Call of Duty for some people. Also, the way that the Black Ops logo goes from 1 to 3 at the end of the trailer gives me chills every single time. This was a great way to introduce the world to this game, and it seemed unapologetic in the way it was showing these futuristic capabilities like wall running, specialist abilities, and the over-the-top environment. That's a really good thing and shows that they are confident in the game and product coming to the market on November 5th. So now I want to take it back a little bit. Right now it's November 4th, 2015 at 9 p.m. You are sat outside your local GameStop with some friends. There's a food truck in the parking lot that's selling some fire tacos and coffee while we all wait for midnight to roll around so we can finally get our hands on Black Ops 3. You've played the multiplayer beta, which was received really well, and it got you and all the boys excited for the final game. This new Zombies direction is worrying a little bit because it's not the crew that we're used to seeing, and there's some weird aliens or some shit, but you're going to give it a try anyway because it's Treyarch. We haven't had a new Zombies map from them in 2.5 years, so I guess it must be good. Finally, midnight hits and the floodgates open. You pre-ordered but didn't have enough money for the Juggernog Mini Fridge Collector's Edition, and you regret that every day since launch. But anyway, you finally got the game and tell your friends, you know what, I'm gonna go home, I'll be online in 10 minutes. After getting home, you pop in the disc, wait for the day 1 patch to install, and are immediately hit with a main menu, the iconic image of a soldier sitting with pistols in hand looking like a bad motherfucker. Just like the Black Ops 1 main menu, but updated to show the futuristic setting that this game was really going for. After clicking through the menu, you are presented with another one that shows that you can go to the campaign, multiplayer, zombies, or a weird new one that just says bonus. And for this video, I think it's good that we go through all of these modes in that order and give them the time in the spotlight each of them deserves for good and for bad reasons. Let's begin with campaign, and while I could simply just say the words train go boom and be done with this section, there's more to it than just that. Only barely though, admittedly. The campaign begins with a cutscene that discusses climate change, war, human cybernetic augmentation, and the line that we're in a new Cold War. We're then introduced to Jacob Hendricks, who tells us about our new mission in Ethiopia. Obviously it's a futuristic Call of Duty game, so they need to talk about a bunch of futuristic mumbo jumbo that means nothing like hacking module in place, recalibrating death system targeting before cocking a gun because we're just so fucking cool. This gives off the vibes of their alpha males who eat raw meat, pump iron in the gym, and give handjobs to their bros in the showers together. From there we begin our first mission after things go south, and then nothing particularly special happens. It's a Call of Duty mission just like the 100 others that we've seen in the past. Shoot some guys, story exposition, shoot more guys, explosions happen, and shoot more guys. That is until we meet Commander John Taylor, who's going to end up being really fucking important to this game because guess what? He's the protagonist. Wow, crazy turn of events, train go boom. We keep going through the mission until a point where there's admittedly a very cool area where your squad is pinned down by an army of robots just running at you and shooting. No matter how many times you kill them or spawn in, and your only option is to run away. In my first playthrough, I didn't realize you needed to run away, and yeah, I kind of sat there for 5 minutes thinking the robots were getting just a little bit excessive. After that is a car chase scene that ends with us holding off more robots for a helicopter that takes off without us. Then in one of the most gruesome scenes in in Call of Duty history, our main character gets taken down by a robot. Our left arm is torn off, our right leg is snapped, our right arm is torn off, and a giant hole is punched straight into our chest until Taylor shows up. Yay, what a good guy saving us like this, and that's the end of the mission. Overall, it's not a good mission, but it had its memorable moments. After entering the next mission, we find out that medics had sort of saved us with bionetic technology that got implanted in our head, so we pass out again, have some hallucinations, and suddenly Taylor's sitting across from us in a train that will eventually go boom. Taylor explains where we are, and at this point, it kind of becomes obvious that this whole campaign is just going to be flashbacks of events that you weren't at, but you need to solve because reasons, I guess. The whole thing is so complicated that there are still videos being made to this day debating what did and didn't happen, the order of events, and a bunch of other shit. Basically, the main character is dead. I know, spoiler alert, but yes, every mission besides the first one takes place in your mind as your life's flashing before your eyes as you die. We don't even know who exactly our main character is because no one gives them a name, and the campaign's ending leaves it ambiguous over whether you're John Taylor or he's just implanted his memories into you. The whole thing's fucking weird and gives me a headache, so I'll summarize it in about 10 seconds. Train go boom, you're dead, and the bad guy Corvus is just you coming to terms with your death. Shit like this is probably the reason why I've only played this campaign twice in 7 years, and I had to look up an explanation when writing this script because it just doesn't make sense otherwise, and it still didn't make sense really. Whole thing was largely forgettable, and even on launch everyone just kind of scratched their heads and more than anything else just asked, why? What was the point? I'm sure the writers thought there was some sort of profound meaning hidden in there somewhere, but honestly it just made no sense to anyone but the handful of people who kept digging after the gameplay had ended. Well, now that you've experienced the campaign and got really confused, let's just brush that out of our heads for the rest of time and head over into the multiplayer section. Right away, you're given a screen with a bunch of characters named the Specialists, and you need to pick one to play as. There is 4 of them to pick from right away, with another 5 waiting to be unlocked by leveling up. There's also a 10th that you can unlock through something with the black market and completing a challenge. I never did it, but that's just how it happens. Each of these Specialists has unique abilities that charge throughout the game and have either offensive or defensive capabilities. Something like this had never actually been attempted in Call of Duty before, so it might have felt a bit jarring to some players, but they largely all played the same at their core, which was nice. Once you have picked your Specialist, then it's time to make a class, and it's always good to see the pick 10 system in a game because it actually makes the player think a little bit. You can't just add 6 attachments to your primary weapon along with 5 grenades, 3 perks, a horse dildo, Specialist, secondary gun that's fully kitted, and more. Pick 10 is good, keep adding it to games, please, for the love of God, Activision, just don't remove it. Now that you picked out everything, it's time to play a match, and there's actually quite a good lineup of maps featuring stuff like Aquarium, which had a really unique feel to it compared to most launch maps that we see. Breach is a bit of a weird map with a lot of wall running, but it's quietly become an iconic map with lots of outplay potential, especially in modes like Uplink. Combine is a basic map and serves its purpose of being close quarters combat fun. Evac is a really underappreciated map that has so many different levels of verticality while still being a leveled out 3-lane experience. Exodus isn't a favorite of mine personally, and from what I remember, it was one of those maps that if you joined mid-game, you'd probably just end up leaving again. Fringe is also an icon and probably the most long-range map that we've talked about so far. It's an absolute sniper's paradise, and it reminds me of Standoff from Black Ops 2 a little bit. Havoc can just get in the fucking bin, honestly. Hunted is either loved or hated, but personally, I love it, and the water running through the level, along with the avenues it creates, is really a nice touch. It's also a gorgeous map with the color palette that Black Ops 3 is using. Infection is a little bit up and down, and with a good team, it felt amazing to play on, but if you were getting spawn killed, then that shit really just hurt your soul. Metro is another map that can get in the bin, but it was a cool idea admittedly. And lastly, Redwood was probably the best at showing off Black Ops 3's movement system out of any of the maps because there's so much outplay potential, especially running around the trees. Oh, actually, lastly is Stronghold, and it's a small map, but you know what, you're never really too far from a fight, so I gotta give it points for that. Even the DLC maps had some absolute bangers, with Splash being a water park, which is such a stupid concept, but it actually flowed quite well and was a lot of fun. Skyjacked is a remastering of Hijacked from Black Ops 2, and with the Exo movement, it really felt like it played differently, but it had that familiar feel to it. Citadel was like a fever dream with you playing in a sorcerer's castle that's now haunted and looks like Zetsubo Nishima from Zombies, And Knockout is a gorgeous Japanese temple that has a bunch of hippie stuff integrated with it. Genuinely one of the coolest and most beautiful multiplayer maps ever created. Usually I don't have high expectations for DLC multiplayer maps, but Treyarch really came out swinging with Black Ops 3 and that was really appreciated. So I think it's time to talk about guns, and sadly on launch there weren't really any that popped out to you as being really instantly iconic from a design perspective like in years past, which was mildly disappointing. There were a lot of great meta relevant guns though, like the VMP, Kuda, HVK, Man of War, M8A7, the KRM, Haymaker, 205 Brecci, Dingo, Locust, and the RK5. That's a lot of weapons that you can use and actually play well with. Each of them were meta relevant in public matches, league play, or actual competitive CWL matches. Again, that's a really good thing because it always gave players different weapons to try out when playing maps that suited varying playstyles. But no Black Ops 3 video would be complete without mentioning just how fucking broken the shotguns were and still are to this day. If you had a jitter modded controller that helped you to shoot faster, or you just had a good trigger finger, then multiplayer basically became a joke. From almost day one, someone using a Brecci was going to shit all over everyone in the lobby. It had great damage, it could beam people across the map, it had a somewhat large magazine, and it fired too quick. Treyarch tried multiple times throughout the year to nerf it, but one way or another, it always ended up at the top of the pile of guns. Like I said, even today, it's the hacker's gun of choice in lobbies and genuinely makes playing multiplayer on this game since 2018-ish uninteresting and downright frustrating. Before I ramble about that too long though, let's get back on track. Black Ops 3's multiplayer actually had a solid list of game modes to complement the mostly good maps that you were playing on. There was all the classics as always, with the addition of Uplink and Safeguard. Uplink was actually introduced with Advanced Warfare and it was insanely fun. The objective was to basically play basketball where both teams need to fight for the control of a ball and bring it to a goal on the enemy side of the map. Throwing it in gained 1 point and carrying it in gave you 2. At the end of the match, team with the most points wins. And I remember some of the most competitive and over the top crazy fun games that I've ever had played out battling it out on Uplink, trying to desperately find routes to throw the ball over a building or hoping not to die before making it into the goal. Even the heartbreak of an enemy intercepting the ball right before going in was fun, and this mode was just so creative and fun with the exo movement system that Black Ops 3 had. I really can't speak highly enough about Uplink, and if there is another advanced movement game, I do want Uplink to come back, but the same can't really be said for Safeguard. Safeguard was a mode where each team needs to try and escort a robot across the map by staying near it and protecting it from getting shot too many times. While on paper this seems cool, anyone who's ever played a Call of Duty public match knows this isn't going to work. For starts, no one in pubs is going to escort this thing because you are 100% going to get shot on by the 3 enemies watching the area that you need to go through. Most of the time you have no cover and your teammates are going to be more interested in keeping their KD up and getting kills rather than completing the objective. Defending was also way too easy, especially if you were playing with friends, because you could just spawn trap the enemy team or wait for some poor idiot to try moving the robot. I don't think really many people are clamoring for Safeguard to come back, and it kind of should probably stay forgotten mode. Something I haven't really talked about until now was the movement systems in Black Ops 3, and I think it's because they weren't actually that controversial. In Advanced Warfare, you could jump 20 feet in the air and move very quickly in different directions on the ground or in midair. Lots of people didn't like that because it was too fast and too clunky, but in Black Ops 3, it was toned down a lot to where you can maybe jump 10 feet, and it was a lot more of a sensitive, gradual movement rather than just very quickly. There was also always a small meter telling you how much exo movement you were able to perform, and it limited the overcomplications of the Advanced Warfare movement. It was also very nice that you could play most of Black Ops 3 with using very little exo movement, but if you did use it and become good with it, then it became an advantage without being truly unfair to the other players. In my opinion, it found a solid ground to the advanced movement, and Infinite Warfare later on used largely the same philosophy because guess what? It worked. That's why there isn't much to say in this section, at least, because simply it wasn't that controversial to me, but it just added enough to make it worth learning and getting good with. Speaking of getting good, let's talk competitive play for a second. The arena mode, which was the ranked play mode in Black Ops 3, was largely underwhelming for me. It lacked a lot of the style, character, and pizzazz that Black Ops 2 had, with confusing ranks that just kind of put me off of competing a little bit. When you did get into a game though, it was quite fun if your squad was prepared and wasn't entirely brain dead. Professional level Black Ops 3 was an absolute fucking treat though, and it was incredible. I watched so much of it. Pro level play really made this game shine, and they were able to push it to the absolute limits. Creative wall climbs with the exo movement, new spots to try out in game modes like uplink, and just overall new ways to play that no one besides the highest quality level players in the world could pull off. The Call of Duty World League, as it was named at the time, was so much fun with long open bracket tournaments seemingly every weekend, and it always gave you something to watch. I really do miss those days, honestly. And lastly, for the multiplayer section, we have to talk about the supply drop system. You knew this was coming, so let's just do it. Supply drops in Call of Duty for a few years were like a cancer. Once they were introduced with Advanced Warfare, and Activision realized they could lock weapons behind a paywall on a game that you already paid for, the floodgates just opened for how much money they were willing to make. In Advanced Warfare, it was mostly good variants of weapons that also looked cool and cosmetic items that were put into the supply drops. With Black Ops 3, however, it was cosmetics, camos, weapons, skins, and more. Think about it this way, right? By the time Treyarch stopped adding items to these supply drops, there were 42 different guns alone to get through supply drops, and most had no way to be unlocked otherwise. What the actual fuck? I remember seeing videos of YouTubers opening 1,000 of these at a time and only getting like 10 of the guns, and I remember news articles of kids spending thousands of dollars in an attempt to get everything on their mom's credit card. Even people I knew personally who were adults spent thousands of dollars getting the last few guns that they were needing. And the worst part is that guns like the Marshal pistols, the PPSH, and the FFAR were actually meta-changing and trashed on everything else that was in the game at launch. Fuck that system, I am so glad it's not around these days. This is where the bulk of the video is going to be spent. There's literally nothing new for me to say about Black Ops 3 Zombies that hasn't already been said. It's a masterpiece to most players in its final form these days, but that wasn't always the full story of it, and I think that's worth discussing. BO3 Zombies was once upon a time hated and really had people doubting the maps and the future of the mode overall. Hell, I mean, it even ended on a sour note, but that's getting ahead of ourselves, so let's just back up a little. When Shadows of Evil was first revealed in July of 2015, it was met with a heavy dose of skepticism from the Zombies community. Black Ops 2 had ended on a weird note with us not fully knowing what was happening in our storyline, but we were looking forward to seeing how it was continued with the next game. Then suddenly, what appeared to be our launch map is filled with new characters and what felt like a storyline with some aliens and some shit. There were some serious question marks around Shadows of Evil as a whole. But then the Giant was revealed shortly after in a small room at Gamescom 2015, where we finally saw a true remastering of Dare East with an intro cutscene that was everything Zombies fans could have ever hoped for. During the events of Origins, our characters had just met, and we didn't know how their relationships were going to progress. Would they hate each other? Would they learn to coexist? Or was Richtofen just going to betray them? But in this reveal trailer, we saw something different. This crew we saw in front of us was a well-oiled machine with a plan. Clearly, the three crew members had teleported into this universe ahead of time and headed to the Dare East facility to confront an alternate version of Richtofen, knowing that if he was pressured, he would summon another version of himself. Obviously, he didn't see the bullet to the head coming, but it shows a lot of foresight by what would become our crew known as Primus, and it means that they're intimately aware of details that the players haven't been told yet. Richtofen is speaking of a better tomorrow, and Nikolai speaks of changing history. Like, what the fuck's going on? Why did we just kill Richtofen? What is his plan? And why does Richtofen have blood vials strapped to his chest? There is so many questions to be asked and answered, and all of this generated so much fan speculation and hype that it almost felt unreal at the time. Zombies has always been popular because it is linked to Call of Duty, but ever since the heyday of Kino der Toten in Black Ops 1, it kind of always felt like a slow, gradual decline in popularity was going on. Now suddenly, everyone and their dog was talking about the zombie story, and these people who were making YouTube videos at the time ate that shit up to feed that audience. Guys like Mr. Waffle Waffles only had 20,000 subs or so around this time, and then began their meteoric rise up the YouTube rankings off the back of people being curious as to what's going on here. And even if you don't like Shadows of Evil, then the Giant would have helped to supplement the feeling of old school Zombies gameplay. With all of that hype in mind, let's move to launch day. Everything is in place, you've tried the campaign a bit and a few matches of multiplayer, and it's finally time to play some zombies. But before I do, I think we should point out that I'm mostly going to be speaking about a very broad player base here of millions, and not just the couple 100,000 that were very into zombies and were intimately familiar with the ins and outs of everything. With that said, as millions of others did, you loaded up Shadows of Evil, hear Jessica going, "Hey you," and begin your match. You are instantly hit with the saxophone music and your character giving a bit of exposition. Nothing, and I mean nothing in Call of Duty gives me chills like that saxophone from Shadows. Anyway, so you look around and there's a few doors, a cauldron looking thing, and a quick revive machine. After a round or so, you probably open up to the next area where you finally see the Gobblegum machine for the first time, and you kinda run out of shit to do. I love Shadows of Evil so much, and it's my favorite map ever made, but this was not an experience that everyone could follow along with. Ideally, what you are supposed to do is open the first door, head back to spawn, go into beast mode of the cauldron, open the locked door, zap the power switch on the wall, break open the crate inside a truck, head into the next area, zap another power switch, turn around, grapple hook up into the air, run across the rooftop to the other side and zap another power switch in about 15 seconds. Then players need to grab the item inside the truck bed, grab the other piece that fell, kill 2 keepers, run to the staircase that you open, head into a room, place everything on the table, hold out against the keepers for 60 seconds, and then grab the item back when it's ready. Every single bit of that I just mentioned is to do just one ritual out of 4 that you need to do to complete in order to just open fucking Pack-a-Punch and turn on perk machines in Shadows of Evil. What the actual hell was Treyarch thinking here? Again, I love Shadows of Evil so much, but statistically more people have completed certain Cold War main quests than have ever completed all 4 rituals in a game of Shadows. These at the time felt like daunting tasks on a large scale map, and again, all of this was required to do simple things such as opening Pack-a-Punch. Then there was quests for getting the Apothicon Sword where there's puzzles and need to take you across the map multiple times for symbols and getting kills at statues. And upgrading the sword as well as a pain in the ass, with us needing to kill like 10 Margwas across 4 rounds, which is insane for players who are just trying to get their hands on the game for the first time. It's really no wonder that these tutorials videos for Shadows of Evil did absolute fucking stonks numbers, because everyone including me needed this shit baby fed to them one detail at a time, because otherwise you weren't figuring it out. Most people can handle basic instructions and can somewhat competently train in circles for a while on zombies, but after the 5th step it got a bit too much for most people. Despite all of that though, if you were someone who took the time to learn Shadows of Evil and really experience all that it had to offer, then you were in for an absolute treat of a map. Each of the main areas, being the Footlight District, canals, and waterfront, all have so much love and attention put into them that it really makes it feel as if Morgue City was a real place where real people were living. The steampunk aesthetic combined with the Lovecraftian layer on top of it all really blends together than I would have ever expected it to. Shadows of Evil definitely passes the vibe check, but vibes aren't the only thing that it's really good at. And nowadays it's easy to forget, but on launch, Black Ops 3's multiplayer was rough to say the least. When crouched, you couldn't sprint away when being hit by zombies, which led to, I'm sure, millions of downs across the player base. Zombies were windmill hitting way too often and quickly for many players to feel like going down was fair and that they had actually just lost. It really just felt like, wow, that kind was shit. For some reason, the old World of War sticky zombies were also present, where once hit it was difficult to get away from them and avoid taking even more damage. The death machine power-up wasn't available, and zombies would despawn from very short distances away. So with Shadows having a lot of small corridors, having zombies respawn in front of you all the time was kind of a nightmare. Luckily though, around January time, all this was changed in a sweeping update, and it made Shadows of Evil buttery smooth to play for the rest of its life cycle. But for those of you masochists who want to experience the old way of Black Ops 3, the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions of Black Ops 3 never got this updated patch, so yeah, if you want to go and suffer, have fun. But back on track again, nowadays Shadows of Evil is a treat to play with almost 7 years of experience under our belts. Hardcore fans know the ins and outs of every single inch of the map, and with the tools available to us, many of us can probably carry a lobby to some level of success. Which is nice in case your old friends ever want to jump on and play some Shadows for some nostalgic reasons. You can probably just carry them pretty easily these days. In that same vein of nostalgia, let's talk about the Giant. It's Darius with upgraded graphics, and I know that what a very thorough breakdown that Luke just gave, and I'm blowing your mind right now, but seriously, it's Darius, but it doesn't actually play like that. You can still sit on the catwalk, and probably for longer than ever with the Pack-a-Punch abilities and Gobblegums, but that's not what I'm talking about though. Most people remember playing Darius by running around in the Thompson room with the furnace and shooting a ray gun or a Wonderwaffe at full hordes. In Black Ops 3, however, this wasn't actually possible because zombies didn't bunch up in the same way they did in older games on release. Those super tight hordes just weren't happening, and people needed a new way to play it. especially because the Wonder Waffle was broken for months. Like, it would only kill a few zombies per shot, it would create crawlers, and sometimes it would actually kill the player for some reason. So what was the workaround for not being able to do most of the old training spots? Well, the answer is overpowered Pack-a-Punch abilities. Yeah, so they were a new introduction to the series as well here with Black Ops 3. After upgrading your weapon once, you can shove it back in the Pack-Punch machine for another 2,000 points and get yourself a flashy new ability for it. There were 5 of these things, being Blast Furnace, which lit zombies on fire, Dead Wire, which was a mini Wonder Waff but on launch was pretty bad, Fireworks, which is just fireworks with bullets, Thunderwall was supposed to be a mini thunder gun but sucked and made a friendly zombie which killed other zombies. And little did we know it at the time, but these 5 abilities changed zombies for better or for worse forever and fundamentally changed the way that we all play. Every single gun in the game was now viable on high rounds if you could Pack-a-Punch it a few times. Box weapons almost became pointless for high rounds because there's no reason to not buy a wall weapon, because now they're infinite ammo weapons that will kill forever because of these abilities. PAP abilities were probably the single biggest change to the zombies core formula up to that stage, and people didn't know how to feel about them honestly. Some still don't, with world record high rounders even creating a more competitive category that doesn't use them at all. And them making the game too easy is especially true for the Giant because, well, the Wonder Waff was broken, players just decided to yeet that thing into traffic and train around in the spawn room running a U-shaped train that's killing zombies continuously with these abilities. More casual players probably trained in front of the catwalk building and turned around once in a while to see a full horde, blast them down with the Blast Furnace and move on with their life. Especially on a map with no boss zombies, Black Ops 3 felt like it was on easy mode for many players. Getting to round 50 used to be a struggle, and in this new game everyone could do it with a little bit of patience and 2 working thumbs. So right away on launch there was a map that was too easy and another that felt way too difficult and complicated for most people. So why didn't Black Ops 3 fail? Well, that's probably because of the unexplained intangible that BO3 actually has. There is no way to explain charm or charisma to somebody because it's not quantifiable and can't be seen or shown in a traditional sense, but anyone who sat down and put a decent amount of time into Black Ops 3 does just know the energy that exudes. There's no other way to say that. Players can feel the love and care put into it by everyone that worked on this project from top to bottom. While the gameplay might not have been in a good state for a few months, you could always see the ways to fix it, and luckily for us they were fixed, and when it was, Black Ops 3 became everything that it should have been at launch. And what that was is a masterstroke on taking a niche audience and turning them into an army of dedicated fans that will live and die by every single movement that Treyarch makes. It was a weird time to be a fan, but a very electric one at that. Now, how do you follow up a really electric atmosphere and people being very hyped up for your game? Well, you turned it up to 11 because Der Eisendrache was revealed in a trailer on January 26, 2016 and released on February 2nd, which is weird because DLC maps don't usually come out that earlier in the year. But anyway, so the trailer prominently featured Dempsey speaking of our crew trying to keep the very fabric of the universe from ripping apart. And later on, we get a proper introduction to our characters again, and this felt like a really great way to follow up with a fan base that was rabid at the time and chomping at the bit to play with these characters and in the universe that was finally starting to unravel before our eyes. Set during World War II in an Austrian castle outfitted to be a Group 935 research facility, Der Eisendrache felt different from the very beginning. This map's intro cutscene features some Germans being chased down by one of the Giant Origins robots. And why were they being chased down? Because there's a frozen body of Tank Dempsey? What the fuck? Anyway, so the Germans shoot the robot and our crew comes walking out of it. Now they have to walk up to the castle and complete their mission. So there's a lot of questions that actually be asked from this cutscene, which is a good thing, and I promise they're all gonna get solved. When the game finally loads in, we see a rocket launching and a town below lit up at night while snow is falling. What a beautiful visual, especially the first few times around that you see it. The rest of the map is as expected, an old Austrian castle with some research equipment, a simple power switch, by the way thank you Treyarch, and a curious callback to Mob of the Dead. Instead of 3 Cerberus heads, we now have to feed 3 dragon heads with zombies until they turn to stone and fall apart. Once we've done all of this, we can head down below the castle to find a bow called the Wrath of the Ancients. We're not done yet though, because now it's time to look for some ways to upgrade this bow. Just like the staffs from Origins, there are 4 upgrades. This time around, it's the Fire Bow, the Void Bow, the Lightning Bow, and the Wolf Bow. These are different enough from the staffs to make them feel unique while calling back to a place our characters have already been. Of these bows, Lightning and Wolf are by far the most used, with Lightning being the top dog, and on launch is probably the strongest wonder weapon ever made. It was nerfed and then sort of buffed again, so now today it's still quite good, but it does have its limitations. Most of the quests for upgrading these bows were all made somewhat sensible and told a small story of their own, which was nice. I especially like the wolf bow because the ghost dog named Luna who digs up bones is really just so cute and wholesome, and I love Luna so much. That means TheRelaxingEnd once again passes the vibe check, but what really makes this map special is the story that it's telling. I already mentioned the intro where a frozen Dempsey is brought to the castle. Well, that rocket that we see in the first few seconds of gameplay actually has a frozen Dempsey on board, and it's headed to Griffin Station, aka Moon from Black Ops 1. And basically the entirety of the Easter egg is getting Dempsey back to the Earth by just yeeting it from orbit and bouncing it off of a clock tower. Makes sense, I guess, I don't know. But then we also get the first boss fight in Zombies history, with us walking up to the MPD pyramid, opening it up with the Ragnarok DG2 specialist, and being teleported into a dark room with a giant corrupted keeper. For those unfamiliar, the keepers are members of the Apothegon race, who are the most ancient beings in existence and hold lots of power. They're sort of ambiguously good throughout the storyline, with one having helped us accomplish our goal in TheRelaxingEnd, so we return the favor by cleansing it to defeat it in the final boss fight. Weird, I know if you've never played it, but I promise it's really cool in game. Once the Keeper is defeated, we need to trigger one more step in which we get the single best cinematic shot in Zombies history. I will fight every single motherfucker who says otherwise. All of the rockets hidden outside the map in TheRelaxingEnd are launched at the moon simultaneously in an effort to destroy Griffin Station and the MPD pyramid that it houses. All I can describe it as is just chills. After this, we finally get our Easter egg cutscene with Richtofen almost turning a little bit evil, it felt like, and using the summoning key device that he gathered in the Shadows of Evil cutscene to trap his friends in midair as he goes to kill the frozen Dempsey. In an act of trust though, unfrozen Dempsey convinces Richtofen to let him do it instead. With a few seconds of saying goodbye, Dempsey switches off life support to the alternate version of himself with all the pain that you should expect in his face. Richtofen then uses the summoning key for the first time that we can actually see to collect Dempsey's soul for a larger purpose later on. But by watching this cutscene, you can tell that these guys are no longer just being thrust together by fate or by circumstance. It's becoming more clear by the day and by the map that they were brought together by friendship and actual love for each other. As Richtofen says in Black Ops 4, when I saw myself die, I felt nothing. When I saw Dempsey die, I felt something. And when I saw Takiao die, I knew I needed to save them. TheRelaxingEnd is considered by a sizable portion of the Zombies community to be the best map ever made, or at worst a top 5 one. Its impact made ripples across the scene and really showed that Zombies was evolving from a little side mode where you just mowed down mindless hordes of zombies, to quite ironically becoming something with a soul, a beating heart that actually made you feel and really appreciate these characters as people that you were getting attached to. And it almost happened too quickly that at the time we didn't even realize it until grown-ass men were crying at the cutscenes. But now it's time to move on to the next map though, and with buzz at a all-time high, what's to come next? Well, Zetsubo Nishima is, and it was revealed in a quite strange way actually. The first that we saw of Zetsubo was the opening cutscene that came out on select Zombies YouTubers channels in late March, almost 2 weeks before the official trailer and 3 weeks before Zetsubo Nishima itself actually released. And that seemed weird at the time, but it turns out that's because that same group of YouTubers were actually flown out to Treyarch Studios and given some time to play Zetsubo early. They would capture footage there and bring it home to make guides and other videos for release day. Problem was that stuff like this hadn't actually happened before, and that meant all of the map's Easter eggs and features were enabled. So when you have a group of the most knowledgeable players on the planet going somewhere with the sole intent of discovering things to make videos on, they kind of find things. All of this means that the day before launch on April 19th, about a dozen YouTube channels posted every single guide and video that you could think of. Everything from map layouts, side Easter eggs, wonder weapon build guides, upgraded wonder weapon build guides, and they also knew about 80% of the main quest Easter egg. To say that this kind of backfired would be an understatement, and it really served to kill a lot of the momentum that Zetsubo Nishima had, especially on YouTube, because at the time the hardcore community loved nothing more than just going into a new map, finding secrets, and discovering stuff for the first time. Then they would go post it over to the Reddit or tag their favorite YouTuber on Twitter in hopes that the collective community knowledge would help to solve this main quest Easter egg. And even with the hunt, it shows this off perfectly because people playing alongside their favorite YouTuber streams, to try to solve it so quickly. But with Zetsubo Noshima, there wasn't really anything because they had solved most of it before everyone even got a chance to actually get their hands on the map, so it just felt so disjointed and disconnected from what we had done so far. The whole thing was kind of deflating, and it really is a shame, honestly, because just going off the back of Der Eisendrache, there was a lot of potential, and if they had just done a regular reveal and everybody had actually gone and played the map at the exact same time together, I feel like it would have at least initially come across better. I know I just rambled about the hardcore community, and I said that I wouldn't, so let's move past that and talk about Zetsubo itself. This map begins with Takeo getting beaten up by another Japanese man while our characters are being held hostage on a ship. Richtofen doesn't speak Japanese, our characters fight the soldiers off, and the ship ends up sinking in the process. They all collectively then use a small capsized boat to float to this island in the middle of the Pacific. Yet again, it's another great way to set the stage for where we're going, and the cinematography is ace as always. Once the map begins, we're dropped into a swamp on this island where everything is overgrown by vines. Zetsubo Noshima is a former Division 9 research facility who committed just a few war crimes in their day. Zetsubo is also quite a large map that's split up into 3 main areas, a Lab A area, a Lab B area, and the bunkers. In each of these lab areas, you need to find a bucket filled with colored water from pools of it around the map and dump it into a funnel of sorts inside of each of the labs. This serves as temporary power to each lab, and in the middle of them is a bunker door which can only be opened when both labs are activated. Opening the doors brings up the boss zombie of Zetsubo, the Thrasher aka Anguishek. This thing is basically a zombie wrapped in vines that is super powerful and will fuck you up real quick. It can also eat the player in co-op games and run around with them in his stomach, which is just fucking hilarious, I'm not gonna lie. Whoever made that is actually pretty creative. Once you do kill the Thrasher, you open the bunker with a lot more areas to actually go through, like a room filled with people wrapped in spider cocoons, or a room filled with water that you need to go inside, trap yourself in, and then survive just to turn on the power switch for realsies this time. Or another area where you can go swim underwater. Basically, this map is really beautiful, but it's a build-a-thon with so many different parts and pieces to keep track of that I personally still need to look up guides if I haven't touched Zetsubo in a few months. The main quest Easter egg is also largely building different things around the map. You're also going to need to purify 4 skulls and an altar to unlock the Skull of Non-Sopway, which is a big skull that picks up zombies and makes them explode. It's really fucking good. I love the Skull of Non-Sopway, but players also need to do some gardening because there are seeds that spawn in when you kill zombies sometimes. You plant them, color with different waters for different effects, and wait for stuff to happen. Let's take this example, like for the Easter egg. We need a giant AA cannon bullet to spawn that's twice the size of the plant, and because fuck physics I guess, you can get it in a plant. Once all of these steps are completed though, you realize this entire Easter egg was just to fix an elevator. Yay. Oh, and some of the steps are really buggy on launch, like the one where you need to take a zipline and if you miss then you died. That thing was bugged as hell and either didn't work or required extreme luck to complete. Anyway, once you have the upgraded soap gun known as the KT-4 and fix the elevator, it's time for a boss fight. This time around, as hinted in the intro cutscene, we're focusing Zetsubo around Takeo. And the boss fight is trying to kill a giant Thrasher while more regular sized Thrashers try to kill us, and it's a little bit underwhelming. All you need to do is just shoot the weak spot once in a while and repeat until it's dead. And if you have certain gobblegums, it's quite literally impossible to actually lose this thing, and it's a very straightforward boss fight, but once he is dead, it reveals this universe's Takeo looking like he's definitely had some experiments done on him and will eventually turn into a Thrasher himself. But just because he's sick doesn't mean he's not wise. Old Takeo has a conversation with newer self about his life and as a famous samurai who was betrayed by the emperor. This whole thing rocks young Takeo's entire worldview when he hears this. You could actually see it even hurts Richtofen to see Takeo go through the pain like this. The two Takeo then go through a traditional Japanese suicide ritual, giving him some control over his death and giving each other the closure that they're looking for in some way. Richtofen collects the second soul and they teleport to what will eventually end up being revealed as Blood of the Dead in Black Ops 4 to collect an insurance policy. Zetsubo Noshima is by no means whatsoever my favorite map. It's got too much to do, the Thrashers are annoying, and hype got derailed very quickly, but despite that, I know there's a lot of love out there for it in the community for the aesthetics, and people really do appreciate the more complex experiences sometimes. The KT-4, Skull of Non-Sopway, and Marshal 16 pistols are all really cool, and there's a lot to learn that are quality of life improvements. Whatever comes next, it's going to need to be big though, and holy shit did that ever deliver. Gorod Krovi is what's to come next, with us getting the trailer on June 28th. Nikolai is heavily focused on here, with him speaking of the war, bloodshed, pain, and he and everyone else had been experiencing in Stalingrad. There's also octopus drones, giant flying dragons, robot zombies with cannons, and the classic PPSH. I really can't explain to you how excited people got seeing the PPSH in this trailer. If nothing from excitement was possible, some YouTubers probably pulled it off, and it was really funny.
Oh my goodness!
All right, Dempsey, once more for old
PPSH!
Yeah!
We also got to see us riding a dragon, which is just on principle badass as fuck. Gorok Krov is cool just on that. After this, we saw the intro cutscene. It begins with the Motorhead classic Ace of Spades blaring through our ears as our characters fall through a portal in the sky. They're in freefall and look to be doomed until they spot a fellow named Peter McCain, who hasn't been seen since World War. What the hell's he doing here? But no time to think about that, he's dead, so they grab his parachute, pull on it, and descend on Stalingrad as a different version of Nikolai sadly chugs away at his vodka while being battered around by a dragon. Finally, we're in the map and can experience what Gorok Krov has to offer. There's only one way out of spawn, and it's to take a route through a large building that has a lot of different ways to actually leave it. One way takes the player to Juggernog and an area that you're gonna need later on. Going up the stairs leads to a split path where, you can go to both different areas, but they both serve sort of the same purpose. Then eventually it all comes back together in a large museum looking area with a power switch, a giant screen, and a huge metal eye that's attached to some sort of device. Without going into exhausting levels of detail with the main quest, I'll just let you know that it is quite long and there is a lot of it to do. Many of the early steps revolve around the dragon in some way, whether it be getting a dragon egg, setting the dragon egg on fire, setting dragons on fire, setting zombies on fire, setting myself on fire. There's a lot of fire and dragons in this map. Later on, you need to gather 6 trophies by various means and gathering the Gauntlet of Siegfried. I will also never forgive Treyarch for never patching the Gauntlet, because using it on high rounds crashes your game, and that thing's a fucking shame because it is so good to use. There's no point in using it because of crashes anyway, and it's just too long to get, and I am so sad. Anyway, let's just, So now in the Easter egg, you need to do some challenges, and one of them requires you to find an orb around the map and shoot it. The next is the infamous bomb step, where you need to hit 6 different lights in order around the map, and if you get any of them wrong, bombs will explode and kill any of the players in those areas. There's also 2 different escort steps, one with a Valkyrie drone, and the other is a Mangor zombie, and next is to defend a Grolf module outside the map and gather a piece from it with your little dragon buddy who came with your gauntlet. Lastly, it's a lockdown step. As I said, there's a lot to do, and I honestly can't be fucked with the Gorok Krov Easter egg. Personally, it's really not my favorite. Finally, we're on to the boss fight, where we need to defend ourselves from a giant dragon while Nikolai is helping to fight it off with us. Once the dragon is dead, we get a miniature cutscene and drunk Nikolai gets just a bit pissed off. He then decides to fight us instead in his giant robot mech thing. Once he's defeated though, our real cutscene can finally begin with old Nikolai taking a chug on his vodka and talking shit to young Nikolai. This cutscene is a great example of who our characters used to be. In World of War and Black Ops 1, we just played as stereotypes who had funny one-liners that never really created much depth to them. Nikolai was just a drunk Russian, hee hee ha ha, but now when confronted with a sober version of himself who has experienced the same trauma of losing his wife to this war and didn't turn to alcohol, he just loses it. You can see his mind snap, and he just wants to bury the trauma even by attempting to kill himself by shooting young Nikolai in the chest with a pistol. Luckily for our Nikolai, he's wearing a metal plate and can retaliate by blowing drunk one's face off. You know what, you can't really reason with a madman, and he almost paid the price for it. Now Richthofen has collected 3 different souls. He opens up another portal in the sky and sends them all to Dr. Ludwig fucking Maxis, who has been Richthofen's enemy since basically day 1. What a swerve. We also get the ominous message after the cutscene of "to be concluded" and the logo for our final map, Revelation. But we aren't done yet, folks, because right after this cutscene, we are dumped back into the map where we hear for the first time ever that duck himself, Dr. Monty. Dr. Monty is supposed to be the sort of leader of the Apothicons and has supposedly been helping us for a very long time. He created the perk machines, gobblegums, wallbuys, and so much more. He's an all-powerful being who claims that he isn't at the same time and really doesn't actually make very much sense when you break him down. In the years since everything's happened with this, I've come to the conclusion that Dr. Monty is actually just Jason Blundell inserting himself into the storyline. And that's because Dr. Monty is basically the narrator of this story who has all the answers but shares none of them and speaks in symbolism and allegories, just like Jason did whenever you saw him speak. Anyway, we find out a ton of information from him, and at this point the community is in full-on fucking meltdown excitement mode. I know I said earlier that launch was one of the most hyped community has ever been, but this was a whole different level of excitement. Any bit of information was getting gobbled up, and Treyarch, despite stumbling with Zetsubo Noshima, was tantamount to gods at this stage. Revelations was set to be the final act of the Aether storyline, but in reality, that doesn't actually make much sense to end it there. It seemed everyone was so caught up in the hype that no one took a minute to stand back and realize the entire DLC season was just collecting souls without really building to a proper conclusion. Dr. Monty was added into exposition dump about this eons old war between the Apothegons and the Keepers. Dr. Monty versus a man we saw in Shadows of Evil named the Shadow Man, who's actually trapped inside of the summoning key right now. And again, it didn't really make all that much sense. How do we conclude it all in one map? Before I get ahead of myself though, back to Revelations and the pre-launch hype. An unfathomable amount of hype was building in the Zombies community, and on August 24th, Treyarch released a teaser followed by a full-on trailer the following day. In these trailers, we find out that Revelations takes place in a new dimension Dr. Monty created with the help of Maxis to house the souls of Samantha and the 4 young members of our crew. They were innocent, they were the children, they were uncorrupted souls that were meant to be housed in this universe to be kept safe forever. And we, our crew, finally make it to this dimension and destroy the teleporter that brought us there before Maxis accidentally lets the Shadow Man free because, yeah, why wouldn't I? Then the Shadow Man proceeds to unleash Apothegons on this universe. They begin destroying everything and teleport us into a rift in space-time. When we do eventually get dropped into this map, we see a giant Apothegon eat our Pack-a-Punch machine and fly off with it. Alright, I guess I didn't really need that anyway, thanks! When exploring the map, we realize that pretty much every area is a recreation of places and journeys our crew has already been on. Shangri-La, Der Azendrock, Kino der Toten, Origins, Mob of the Dead, and Nocturne and Toten, just to name some of them. And I think that this was actually lost on people during the initial release who saw this as mostly a letdown. That our potential final Aether storyline map was just them reusing old maps and mashing them together, but personally I see it as reflecting on days past and the events who shaped the reality that they created. Despite a bit of skepticism though, Revelations got off to an incredibly hot start, and the main quest Easter egg burned hotter than anything else. People like NoahJ456 were reaching incredible figures of over 100,000 concurrent viewers on YouTube, which at the time was nearly unheard of. YouTube streaming sucked back then and was especially niche for something like Zombies, and this was really something to watch and see. It really felt like the community had come together to make this happen. But sadly, this was actually the high point, because once people really started to get stuck into the Easter egg and high rounds, this was really where the cracks began to show. Firstly, the main quest was getting solved at the normal pace that you'd expect, and then suddenly everyone hit a wall at the exact same time. There's a step where players need to collect 6 bones by shooting rocks around the map and then sucking them up with the Apothecan Servant. The community was able to find about 4 of these bones, but couldn't find the last few if our lives had actually depended on it. Night and day for literally a full 7 days, players and streamers sat around looking in every corner of Revelations trying to find this bone. We had even gotten to the point where we started to think maybe this just wasn't the step and this could have just been for a side quest, or maybe it was just somewhere that didn't actually lead anything. But eventually though, by complete accident, this was solved, and from there it only took a few more hours to enter the boss fight, where most teams admittedly crash. Don't get me wrong, this boss fight is fucking cool. You beat the big bad Shadow Man in a room that is dark and brooding with red pillars that really fit the atmosphere, but it was just a little bit simple, I feel, for being what was supposed to be the last Aether map ever. But the real controversy begins in the outro cutscene. Maxis and his lover Sophia, the big ball with the eye from Gorod Krovi, merge and fly into the Apothegon's sun, getting rid of all the baddies and corruption that have been brought into that universe. A new day has metaphorically and literally dawned on Zombies in those few moments. Dr. Monty, however, doesn't see his work as being done and realizes that our premise crew had actually drank their insurance policy blood vials that Richtofen had been holding on to for so long. Drinking those blood vials had kept them from fading out of existence, and they argue that, hey, we should continue on living, but Monty sees it as a risk because keeping realities open that might allow evil to seep back in isn't a good thing. Then suddenly Monty, because he is an omnipotent, all-powerful being, just wipes us from existence as this cycle ends and a new one begins with our characters in medieval France with the original origin staffs. These few minutes of cutscenes single-handedly killed about 8 years of hype and excitement for a large portion of players. Once again, our ending was just a swerve that taught us that nothing, and I mean nothing, ever happens in Treyarch ending cutscenes. People were pissed, to say the absolute least. We have nowhere to go, only a little bit of speculation, and honestly this left all of us feeling empty inside. It was a collective sense among the community of just, that's it? That's all you guys got? Looking back now is obvious because of what I mentioned earlier and the fact that Black Ops 3 was making hand over fist with these DLCs. Activision and Treyarch were not going to let their big money-making side mode end for the sake of a clean-cut ending when they could stretch it into another game or two. A lot of anger, a lot of disappointment followed Revelations, and even on the gameplay side, people weren't especially happy either. I mentioned way back in the Giant that players complained about Black Ops 3 just being too easy, but now in Revelations we had the upgraded Apothicon Servant, the Thunder Gun, Pack-a-Punch abilities, Dragon Shield, Low Arnie's, a mask that let player take 9 swipes before going down, and a partridge in a pear tree. You were basically fucking invincible, and that was evident by the fact that crashes were the only thing stopping high rounders from reaching the maximum of round 255 sooner than they actually did. In the span of a week, it almost felt like Black Ops 3 had tarnished its own legacy, but time has actually been kind to this, just like Origins with Black Ops 2. Nowadays, Revelations is looked at with some kind of fondness, especially for its gorgeous visuals and laid-back gameplay style over the more hardcore maps like Shadows of Evil. No one's saying it's the greatest map ever made, but it's solid now, especially since we know how the last of the Ether storyline actually did play out in the end. But now the DLC season is over, I think it's time that we touch on something that I haven't talked about at all yet, and that's mod creation tools for Black Ops 3. I wanted to save this bit because they are very important to the long-term success of this game, especially here in 2022. For those few people unfamiliar, Black Ops 3 allows player to create mods, custom map creations, skins, perks, characters, and almost anything else that your heart really desires. These tools weren't really present for about a year after launch, but once they did come in, players started slowly making really good maps and they finally began to trickle in a little bit. With an absence of new zombies content in years like early 2017, 2020, and 2022, these creations by fans really helped to bridge the gap between games. YouTubers and fans alike could jump into new maps and modes for content that no one had ever seen before and helps to showcase the creativity of these mod creators. Right now, Black Ops 3 on console is basically dead and always will be. Hackers fill up multiplayer lobbies, some are in the zombies lobbies, and just as many people really aren't searching for games on console these days. On PC, however, where custom zombies is available, Black Ops 3 reaches an average of up to 15,000 concurrent players around sale times and 5,000 in non-sale periods. That doesn't sound like very much, but no other COD game usually cracks more than a few hundred at peak hours. Mod tools for Black Ops 3 are an absolute lifesaver and an incredible source of content. Thank you to Treyarch for letting us use them, and thank you to the modders for putting in the work to make new experiences for everybody. Lastly, on the zombies agenda, only about 10,000 words into the script is the one and only Zombies Chronicles. The story really begins with Infinite Warfare actually, with its reveal trailer being one of the most disliked YouTube videos of all time. Sales numbers were lacking, and attaching Call of Duty 4 Remastered as a pre-order bonus didn't even get the sales numbers to where Activision wanted them to be. So after only a few months, it really became evident that Infinite Warfare had failed and something needed to be done. That means around late February, there started to be some rumors floating around in the YouTuber circles that something was going to happen for Black Ops 3. A person who was my friend at the time showed me some screenshots from a big YouTuber telling him that him and a few others had actually flown to Treyarch to play a fabled DLC 5. And it's not even like I could be skeptical because those messages were actually sent to him, they weren't photoshopped, and at the time I was excited, but honestly I kept my mouth shut. But evidently someone else who had seen the screenshots wasn't quiet, and before long this rumor had spread like absolute wildfire. People just felt like there's no way a DLC 5 is coming to Black Ops 3. They've never done that before ever. But what if it is real? What maps are we getting? Is Treyarch going to make more maps after that? Will there be a DLC 6? There are so many questions but no real answers. And then suddenly it happened. On May 4th, 2017, JC Backfire uploaded a video of him at his college dorm with no other than the man himself, Jason Blundell. With one zipping down of a sweatshirt, history had changed. Zombies Chronicles was revealed to the world. 8 classic Zombies maps, all being remastered and coming to Black Ops 3 as one big bundle for only $30. The biggest news in Zombies history was just shared randomly on a YouTuber's channel with 100,000 subscribers, and the community couldn't have been any more happy for him. Noctera Untoten, Verrucht, Shino Numa, Kino der Toten, Shangri-La, Moon, Ascension, and Origins, all in stunning HD quality, built again from the ground up with a new additional side quest created just for us Zombies fans. No multiplayer bullshit, no trickery, this is a Zombies only DLC for the first time since Black Ops 1's Resurrection pack. What a time to be alive, and the best part is that from the moment it was announced, we were only 12 days away from launch. And for a week up to release, videos would be releasing from the group of YouTubers who played it early, showcasing these maps to the world. And I know earlier on I complained about this sort of thing, but this was different because we knew exactly what we were getting, since at their core they're just remasters. But even with it just being remasters, Zombies Chronicles basically broke the Zombies community with excitement. These maps hadn't been available on current generation consoles in any form, meaning most people probably hadn't played them in years, so nostalgia was literally just dripping from us. And I think most people already know this, but Zombies Chronicles went on to be the best-selling PlayStation DLC in history. It sold millions and millions of copies, and for good fucking reason. And for me personally, this time around Zombies Chronicles, where I went from a channel growing very slowly with about 1,000 subscribers to gaining 4,000 or 5,000 subs per month for a little while, and it led me to here in this video. But it's not just me, everyone has fond memories of Zombies Chronicles and the summer of its release. It felt like there was no better time to be a Zombies fan, especially coming off the back of an insanely hyped year that had a disappointing ending that actually felt redeemed from this love letter from Treyarch. Most of the maps played exactly as you'd expect if they were ported over to Black Ops 3, but a map like Moon was actually greatly improved because of the Gobblegums, Widow's Wine perk, and the general systems of the game mode helped for a much smoother experience that actually made it a lot less annoying to play through. Other maps such as Origins felt like a slight downgrade, with the Panzer being a huge bullet sponge and Mud being more brutal to navigate. All in all though, Zombies Chronicles was a masterstroke when it was released as a marketing strategy, but honestly we didn't care because it felt like it was actually from the heart. So lastly for Zombies, I'm going to quickly talk about the other two modes of Dead Ops Arcade and Nightmares mode. Honestly, Dead Ops is a very specialized game mode that I'm not qualified to really comment on very deeply because I played it maybe a dozen times ever and then don't really touch it again. Not because it's bad, no, not at all, but just because it's a top-down shooter and it's not really my passion. I don't really think about it that much and I don't really have that urge to go and play it. From what I do remember though, I enjoyed it and it was received well, so I think it was a worthy successor to Dead Ops 1. The Nightmares mode is a bit different though, because its whole objective was to be the campaign, but with zombies in most areas instead of soldiers. And I believe this actually had a lot of potential to be very good if it was actually in a good campaign. The problem is, as we established, that campaign wasn't very good at all. But I will say though, there is reason to try this again in the future, possibly for a dedicated zombie standalone title, but for now, Nightmares is a forgotten mode because it didn't really have much work put into it aside from the absolute bare minimum. And the last game mode in Black Ops 3 as a whole is the Freerun game mode. To summarize it, you try to beat parkour courses as quickly as you can, and that doesn't actually sound cool until you realize that on release it was very competitive at times and videos of Freerun were getting millions of views. Too bad Treyarch never actually added any more Freerun maps and just let the mode die. It's a shame honestly, because the maps were good and it had a massive skill ceiling to reach. Okay, well, after a little over an hour, here we are at the longest video I have ever created by more than double the length. This was probably the hardest video I have ever worked on in my life. Going into this, I never realized I had this much to say about Black Ops 3, and the worst part is that I probably could have made this video twice as long if I had said everything I needed to say, or I could remember all the tiny details that have long slipped my mind. Black Ops 3 almost feels like a visual novel that somehow worked when someone crammed it all into a video game. The storytelling in Zombies is the finest Call of Duty has ever done to that point, and it created a feeling that few times has ever been recaptured. There's a reason no one shuts up about it 7 years later, and why YouTubers are still able to make a living playing custom maps even when a game like Vanguard flops like a fat guy at the pool. Is it fair to call Black Ops 3 a generationally good game? I don't know, I'm kind of hesitant because without Zombies Chronicles, the game's legacy would be changed a lot, or even going a step further, without any DLC maps, Black Ops 3 could be considered a basic game to casual fans and Zombies players. As a complete package though, it's hard to argue anything is better or has had a longer lasting impact, and this may seem cheesy, but let's all raise our glasses to a game mode that made us smile, a game that made us cry, throw controllers, fall in love with characters, and made new friends along the way. Zombies will find its way back to glory in time. We just have to believe and be patient because guess what? We've done this all before. Thank you to Black Ops 3 for existing. My voice is absolutely fried. I am going to go and lay down. If you did enjoy this video, then check out the Black Ops 2 video essay or like the video and subscribe. I love you guys. Bye-bye.